Well, good evening. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Tom Burrows, Commissioner at Large, District 2. Tonight, however, I will be acting as Mayor Pro Tem due to the unavailability of Mayor Garner. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is participating knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. Please be sure you are speaking into a microphone to ensure your comments are heard and an accurate record is made. I will now call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to announce and call the roll.
Good evening. You are hereby notified that a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas is scheduled to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, April 4th, 2024 at 5 p.m. for a budget workshop in the fifth floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building, 701 North 7th Street, Kansas City, Kansas. Roll call. Hill. Here. Kane. Here. Lopez.
Here.
Stites. Davis. We have an absence memo. Bynum. Here. Townsend, we have an absence memo. Burns.
Here.
Ramirez, we have an absence memo. Burrows.
Here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Tonight, we're continuing our series on budget workshops. I'll ask our County Administrator, Mr. David Johnson, if he has any opening remarks.
Well, as you know, we've started the budget season with presentations by Reggie and his team. I believe it was last week, wasn't it? Or 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And we started to talk about the concept that Kansas has on revenue neutral option for municipalities to entertain. At the end of the last meeting, a few of the commissioners asked some very interesting questions, and Reggie committed to come back in this meeting to answer those questions, and then hopefully at the end of the meeting have some sort of consensus on starting the budget process in general with or without the framework of revenue neutral to guide us during the next couple months. So we turn this over to Reggie Lindsay. Reggie.
Thank you, David. Good evening, commissioners. I have with me from the budget team, Michael Peterson and Mike Grimm. Michael Peterson is our assistant budget director and Mike Grimm is our research manager. And then we also have our brand new CFO, Shelly Canuva, back here. And then also Debbie Johnson, our deputy CFO, who's accompanying us. So what we plan to do tonight is recap some of the important information we covered on March 21st. And then we plan to touch on some of the requests from the March 21st budget workshop that you all had for us. So starting out, again, we just kind of touch on what our priorities are for our 2025 budget. And basically what that is to uphold physical sustainability, also foster economic development, and focus on service and communication and improve our infrastructure. So when we're talking about property tax and the tax levy and the revenue neutral, whether we go revenue neutral or don't go revenue neutral, those only impact our tax levy funds. And then in the city of Kansas City, Kansas, we have the city general fund and the city bond and interest fund on the city side. And then on the county side, we have 9 different funds that levy a property tax, which include the county general fund, parks and rec, county bond and interest, aging, elections, development, disability, health department, or health levy fund, mental health, and then our county initiative funding on infrastructure. So one of the important things on the county side is that what we do on the county side is really driven by things that happen at a state level. There aren't things that we have a lot of control of. So for instance, you have like the district attorney that's over there, also district courts, sheriff's department, and then aging, which state kind of tells us what to do with aging also. So to just kind of touch, when we do talk about property tax on the city side, I just wanted to give you an idea of how much of the revenue comes from that. So property tax on the city side makes up 20% of the revenue. The biggest portion of revenue on the city side is a sales tax. So with the property tax, it again, it makes up 20% of the revenue coming into the city revenues. And then on the county side, it does make up property tax does make up most of the revenue there, coming in at like 70%. So it is definitely a big impact on the county side. So with the tax levy fund impact, if we were to go revenue neutral with the two city funds, if we realize going full valuation, there would be like $8.7 million more into the city side of the property tax levies, which sounds like a whole lot of money, but it's basically just like 3% increase for those funds. And then on the county side, the total there for all the tax levy funds is $9.5 million that would be coming in additional, and that's based on, we're estimating 13% increase in property taxes across the county. So the makeup there with that $9.5 million is a 9% increase to all the county funds. So between both the city and the county, this is like an $18 million impact. When you're the city general fund and the county or the city bond and interest fund, we're losing about 4.5 mils that we would have to cut off if we don't go revenue neutral. And then on the county side, if we go or decide not to go revenue neutral, it's almost 4.5 mils that we'd be shaving off. We have on the screen the two financial schedules we have from the city general fund. One is a revenue neutral rate estimate, and that's one at the top, and then the one at the bottom is a full valuation estimate. Some of the important things to say about the city general fund. If we were to go revenue neutral, we would have we already have a structural imbalance in the 2024 budget, and then in 2025 budget, and going out to 2029, that structural imbalance would only grow. And that is where we can see that where it says net change in fund balance. And then one of the things when we get out to 2029, we wouldn't even have a fund balance and wouldn't even be able to approve a budget if we were to go revenue neutral. And then also another thing to point out is, although in 2025, we do have a 21% fund balance, lowest we would like to go based on our fund balance policy is 17%. And we can see that fund balance quickly starts to go down and starting in 2027, we don't have the 17%, goes down each year to almost 7% in 2029.
Reggie, we have a question, if I may. Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I am so sorry to ask you to go over this again, especially if we saw this same thing 2 weeks ago, but this slide, looking at revenue neutral estimates, the very top line with total revenues, when we are seeing increases, those increases must be estimates. They aren't property tax increases, so they must be sales tax and pilot.
Yeah. So sorry.
Well, I mean, if we go, I guess question number one is, when we look at this, is this an assumption that we've chosen revenue neutral every single one of these years out?
So the assumption is in 2025, it would be revenue neutral. Then in 2026, we'd be at 7% increase. And then 2027, 2028, and 2029 would have a 4% increase.
So we're only looking at revenue neutral for the one budget year. And
Yes.
this is the chart. Now, if we are revenue neutral for 2025, then the difference, the fund difference from 24 to 25 of what looks like about 3.5 million would be coming from other funds, not property tax. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it would be coming from other revenues that go into the city general fund.
Okay,
And
so,
that could be referenced on one of the earlier slides where we were looking at the pie chart and it talked about all the different revenues coming into the city general fund.
okay, so this chart is assuming only 2025 as revenue neutral. And the fund increases are from places other than property tax.
Yes.
Thank you.
And one thing to keep in mind with, and when you do go with revenue neutral in 2025, it sets a floor. And you only, it only grows like 7% based on the revenue neutral. So
Please continue, Reggie.
and then the financial statement at the bottom, the full valuation estimate. Basically, we have total revenues there in 2025 where we are working the full assessed value in at 13%. And then the next year, 2026, we are at 7%. And then from 2027 to 2029, we're at 4% growth for property tax. And we do have growth in for all our other revenues at about 3%. And then like total expenses, we have those set at like inflation rate. And then like so like 3% for personnel, we have that built in. But we can see some of the important things that's going on in 2025 is that we would be structurally balanced with our budget going all the way out to 2027. But one of the things that is going on, even though we would have full valuation in 2025, our expenses are definitely growing quicker than our revenues. So when we get out to 2027, we do end up having a structural imbalance. And that structural imbalance continues to grow from 2027 through 2029. The important thing to also look at is while we do have what our fund balance estimate percentage is of 17%, we end up having 23%. And we do end up having that going all the way out to 2029, but we start to go into like a structural imbalance.
Thank you, Reggie. Somebody else had a question, Commissioner Kane?
Reggie, can you give us an example of what's going up? You know, like concrete, asphalt. Can you do that? Yes or no, maybe?
Yeah, so when we later in the presentation, we do have that information that you did request. Do we cover it when we get to that? Yes.
Thank you, Reggie.
So the next information that we're going to look at is the county general fund. And again, we have the revenue neutral rate estimate and then also a full valuation estimate. And county general fund, some of the assumptions to make about the revenue is that in 2025, in the revenue neutral rate model, we're assuming not where our property tax will not grow. But in the outer years of 2026, we're forecasting 7% growth. And then in 2027 to 2029, we're looking at a 4% growth. So one of the things we can see with starting in the county general fund is that our structural, and their change in fund balance is not balanced out. We're structurally imbalanced every year from 2024 to 2029 if we go revenue neutral. Also, another important thing to see is our reserves as a percent of expenditure, which we would like to be at 17% at the lowest end. We don't meet that in any of the years from 24 to 2029. And going down into the full valuation estimate, revenues, we're assuming 2025, we're having a 13% increase in property tax revenue based on the excess value that we're estimating this year. And in 2026, we're estimating, again, a 7%. And then 2027 to 2029, we're estimating a 4%. So one of the things to see in this full valuation model is that we are structurally balanced each year from 2025 out to 2029. One thing when we get down and look at what we would like to have as a lowest fund balance percentage of 17%. We're at 14%, but each year it does start to grow into the outer years. So which is pretty positive when we look out into the future if we were to go full valuation. So next, we're going to jump into information requests from our March 21st budget workshop. And the first piece of information that you requested, Commissioner Kane, Mike Grimm is going to cover it.
Good evening, Mike Grimm, UG's research manager. When we go to the store, we're all aware of, whether we know it or not, the consumer price index. And that's the measure of inflation we pay at the grocery store, for example. But the producer price index, the PPI, is a measure of inflation at the wholesale level. And these would be for items used in manufacturing or the construction process. This list that you see on the chart are those that would be utilized quite frequently by local governments to maintain services, infrastructure, things like that. I will note on this list, you don't see steel. It had such an increase in 2021 of 88%, almost doubling, that we did leave it off this chart, just not, so we didn't want to skew these other items and the impact that you see on the screen. So over the 10-year period, these items had an annual rate of change of just under 4%, 3.7%. If we look pre-pandemic, 14 to 20, it was flat, down about 0.2%. But if we look post-pandemic, 20 to 23, those items are up about 12% annual rate of change. So we do see, since the pandemic, prices have dropped a little bit, but still higher than the pre-pandemic levels.
When, well, we're gonna go back here. You're gonna have to dig some research on this. Kathleen Sebelius was the governor, and then she took away the machinery and equipment taxes, which was several $1 million. So can you go back and look at what that was? Because it was a major effect on our budget when it happened. And we lost a great deal of money. And now when there's all these plant expansions and stuff like that down in Fairfax, they don't have to pay for the machinery and equipment. So I'd like to see what year it was, how much it was, and then how much money we've lost since then. Thank you.
Also, one important thing about this chart is you do see the lines going up and down. It looks like prices did go down, but one of the things that happens is once the prices go up, they never come down for us. It's like sets a floor. So like the percentages do go down, but once you set the rate and it goes high one time, that price doesn't go down for us. It just keeps going up. So it sets a floor, like prices never actually go down for us. So this is a view of an inflation trended budget versus like budgets we actually adopted over the years. And we started in 2006. So in 2006, our budget was $239 million. And what we did was make assumptions that personnel grew at 3.2% each year. And then also that our contracts, which could vary from contracts that we have with the KCATA to software as a services contracts, that they grew at 4% a year. And then commodities, which range from a vast amount of things, we forecasted they grew at like 10.6% a year, and then capital at 10%. So once we get out to our current budget, our budget that we approved for 2024 was a $467 million budget, but an inflation trended budget would be a $584 million budget. And basically what this is telling is that our budget that we have built is not keeping up with inflation. And it's basically what we kind of talked about with looking at the PPI is that the prices never really go down. They have smaller increases each year with inflation, but inflation actually had never went down most of the years.
This slide answers a question we had during the last budget workshop, the number of times the city and county mill has increased or decreased since 2005. And this table only shows those years where a change occurred. So on the city side, city mill, over these years shown, it was raised one time, lowered 8, for a net change of minus 6.73 mils. On the county mill levy, it was raised 3 times and lowered 3 times for a net change of 3.448. So overall, both those funds, those mill levies, and those combined changes was a minus 3.282 mils since 2005.
Michael Peterson, Assistant Budget Manager. So we got asked the question of comparing the organic change to the mill rate versus what we actually levied each year. So that's what these next 2 charts are. So first we looked at Wyandotte County. So what you see here is the orange line is what we would have what the taxes would have been if we would have kept the mill constant at 31.279 mils, which is the 2005 mill rate each year. And then the gray line is what we actually levied each year. So I'll just point out that 2008 was the recession when property values significantly dropped. So you can definitely see that line in the orange, as Mike Grimm just mentioned. So we raised we raised the mill rate in 2010, 2011, and 2015. So those are some of the points that you can see the increases grow on the gray line. Those did not get reduced until recently. So the gap between the 2 lines is now about 19% difference from what it would have been. So on average, the assessed value for Wyandotte County grew about 3.5% or 79.7% from 2005. And on average, our assessed ad valorem has grown by 4.4% annually, with a total growth of 114% since 2005. So if you look at the Kansas City, Kansas side, again, we have the orange line showing 42.742 mils, which is what was levied in 2005. Again, you can see the impact of the recession in 2008 and the drop of property values, with the Kansas City, Kansas funds being more reliant on other diverse revenue streams. We didn't have as big of an increase until 2011, when the tax levy was increased in that year. We can point out in 2014, 16, 17, and 18, those are the years that the mill was dropped, essentially keeping the levied ad valorem flat for most of that time period. So on average, you have about 3.4% growth to the assessed valuation. On the city side, about 76.4% growth overall, which is actually 3.3% less growth than the county for the same time period. And then we have about 2.8% annual growth in our levied ad valorem for the same time period. So we'll just point out that each of those times when we dropped taxes on the dropped the mill rate, on the city side, it was to the general fund, not the bond and interest fund. So it had a much more substantial impact on our city general fund operations.
This slide looks at the Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas general fund mill levies. For the period that you see, we go a few years before consolidation, just to show that impact. So the city mill was about 48.6 mils in 95. The 23 tax levy mill is 21.42, so that's a drop of 27 mils or 56%. The County 13.5 mils in 95 and 28.18 in 23. I will note that increase on the county general mill levy fund is in the mid 2000s. There were several smaller mill levies that were consolidated into the general fund, general fund mill, and museum, appraiser's office, extension, soil conservation. So there were a few that were added to the general fund on the county side. This side looks at the county and KCK mill levies, all funds. So on the city, we're doing general and bond interest, and on the county, we're starting out in 95. I think there's nearly 20 different mills that broke down into, as Reggie pointed out, now there are 9. So when we look at all funds, KCK dropped about 26 mills, a 40% decrease, and on the county, it was raised 4.5 mills over that period, or a 14% increase.
And what we have here is just some quick statistics about the BPU pilot. So BPU pilot revenue for 2024, we're forecasting at $37 million, and that's equivalent to almost 22 city mills. So the reason we kind of bring this up is this is definitely something that David Johnson, our county administrator, is going to be having us look into this year, where we're going to be trying to cut at least a quarter of the BPU pilot rate. The BPU pilot right now is at 11.9%. The highest it's ever been is 12.9%. Pre-recession, we were at like 9.9%. And we're definitely shooting to get back to that in the next, in the coming years. So definitely something we'll be working on. And one of the things is if we are to go revenue neutral, that would kind of diminish our chances to be able to cut the BPU pilot. So if we're allowed to not go revenue neutral, it will like give us some more options on like different things and different programs that we can offer. So it's just one thing to keep in mind, like with going revenue neutral, it would kind of diminish our chances to be able to cut the BPU pilot, because we can see it's such a big piece of the city general fund. So, our recommendation is to not follow a non-revenue neutral calendar. Not saying that we wouldn't be able to cut any mills or anything like that. We definitely are working to be able to cut some of the property tax mills. What following a non-revenue neutral calendar will do is give us 37 more days to work our budget. Also, so what's going on there is, if we do go revenue neutral, we end up having to submit our budget earlier, which would be like August 25th, as opposed to if we don't go follow a non-revenue neutral calendar, we would have until October 1st to submit a budget to our clerk's office. And so this would be like our third time dealing with revenue neutral, and you as an elected body, we haven't went revenue neutral, but there have been a lot of things that have been accomplished, like within not going revenue neutral. So we did cut 2 mills two budget seasons ago from the county general fund. We also were able to add more funding to our Parks and Rec department, which was a high priority. We also were able to set aside a mill for the whole county to be able to do road and street work. So we allocate money to Bonner Springs and Edwardsville now, along with the city of Kansas City, Kansas. And that was definitely something we were able to do. And then we also expanded our senior utility rebate program. It's been very, very successful this year, which Monica is running. I don't think we've ever seen as many people. I know we haven't seen as many people come in as we had this year. And then we also, on top of that, have a BPU pilot relief, where some citizens will not pay the pilot based on if they're disabled or elderly and based on their household income. And then for the city of Kansas City, Kansas, we've added 25% more to the budget for infrastructure on streets. Then we've allocated more funding to our unhoused population. And then we also reopened Fire Station 15 within the last 2 years. And I throw some of these things out because with not following the revenue neutral calendar, it allows us to get more creative and find different ways to do things. So it's just those are some of the benefits to being able to go revenue neutral. And I know a lot of people want BPU pilot relief and also property tax relief. And then there's more just other kind of services that people want. So we're allowed more time if we were able to find follow a non-revenue neutral calendar. Any
Comments, any questions? Commissioner Kane?
Thank you. So we don't go revenue neutral, but that's still, we know we're not going to raise the mill levy, but that still gives us an opportunity to look and see what we can do with the mill levy. Is that correct? Okay, and then Debbie, the other day when the folks were in here talking about our monies, and I believe the comment was, we're not going broke. Is that correct?
Debbie Johnsher, Deputy CFO, that
Not going broke.
no, we're not going broke. I mean,
Say that again, please.
no, we're not going broke.
Anyone else? Commissioner Hill?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the question. You said,
Commissioner Hill, could you speak into your microphone,
Sure.
please?
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
okay, one of the things you said was you had more options if you did not go revenue neutral. And then you mentioned about the BPU pilot. I think you said 12.9 was about the average pilot, but then you mentioned 9.9%. So I'm probably not saying something right.
So the 12.9% number that I mentioned that's the highest that the pilot has ever been. Right now, we pay 11.9%, or citizens pay 11.9%. And before the recession, it was set at 9.9%. And that is, we would like to work to get back to the 9.9%. And something we will be working on during this budget season is to cut the pilot like a quarter of a point and that's like almost a $900,000 impact to our each quarter is about a $900,000 impact to our revenues.
Okay, that sounds good. Just on a general basis, and you may not know the answer to this, I just wondering how would that impact the average household going from the 11.9% to 9.9%?
For some reason, I think it may be like $1.40 or somewhere around there. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I think like the average pilot, I think I have to check, but it seems like I remember it's like $17 a household possibly. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Reggie, if I may, I'm looking at your general fund revenue estimate, and if we don't use revenue neutral, I'm looking at the full valuation estimate. I still see our expenses are still running pretty close to our revenue stream, even though we're taking in an additional $40+ million in 2029 from 2024. I mean, that's an act. I want to make sure I'm not exaggerating my numbers, but if I'm looking at the 2024 full valuation estimate of 169 million. When we get to 2029, your projections are almost 207 million. So that's an increase for roughly about 40 some million, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and yet I still see we're exceeding those with our expenses. So even though we're doing full revenue, we're still exceeding our revenues by $4 million, even at full valuation estimate. Is that how I'm to read this?
Yes, and the reason therefore that we currently have expenses that are growing faster than our revenue stream is. But we definitely have things where we have added positions in public safety. So that has had an impact. We've had some grants that have run off for like public safety, where we have picked them up in the city general fund.
Sure.
And so like we're reopening Fire Station 15, we added more employees, and then we have a safer grant that's in the fire department where we're adding people to it.
And one of the big impacts of that on the revenue side, I'll just add, is that we have not projected very much growth for sales taxes just because of performance that has happened in recent periods. So sales tax is a big contributor to the city general fund. And if that revenue stream stays fairly flat, then we're fairly dependent on pilot or property tax income to make up the difference.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement, Mike. I guess the comment I would have is even at full valuation, we're still having to draw down from our reserves in that particular budget. And that tells us that we need to go back and actually review within the budget where we can become more efficient and cut our expenses somewhere, find a way to live within our revenue means. And I think that's what I'm coming away from this full valuation presentation. I understand that we have to run through this revenue neutral exercise mandated by the state statute, but here we are now talking a full valuation, and we're still falling short of meeting our revenues that are coming in. So, and you mentioned it, our sales tax growth. Could you give us a percentage of what those sales tax growths have been since in the last 10 years, maybe in a future discussion, what the medium or average has been over the last, let's just go the last 10 years. I think our sales tax, I mean, this community couldn't count much on sales tax for a handful of decades. And now we have sales tax going into our budget, but it's the accountability of those dollars, those sales tax dollars is where they're being utilized. But you talk, we're still having an increase in valuation, which is a positive for the community that we have increased valuation. We have sales taxes that have supplanted some of the burden that was on property taxes a couple of decades ago. We have economic development that has occurred in our community, which has helped raise those appraised values. We have a smaller workforce than what we had a number of years ago because we've become a little more efficient in some departments and through consolidation. But we've also increased fees to cover some of the financial shortfalls that we've had. Plus, we've had population growth over the last decade. So to have all of those positives and still showing a deficit should be somewhat concerning. And so I would hope that as we move forward, that we as a commission can find a way to cut down our expenses to meet our revenue projections. Because I think these revenue projection, a full valuation estimate, you've given your percentages as to what they are. But I can remember in one discussion a couple of years back that when we were talking about sales tax, it was a very conservative number and we exceeded it, I want to say, by about 4%. And that money went into an additional increase in valuation, which gave us, more money to operate our budget. So I would like to find a way that we can take those positives and help those positives move us into not having to take from our ending balance, that especially on the city general fund. I haven't studied the county fund to the extent. We are a little bit better on the county side than we are on the city side, especially in the out years when we go from full valuation estimate. But the city side is the challenge facing us right now in reference to, even if we stay at full valuation, we're still going to exceed our revenue. I mean, that's what I come away from the presentation that we just had. And if that's not an accurate statement, please correct me.
So at full valuation, in 2025, we will definitely have a positive fund balance. But in the outer years, we do end up having like some issues out in 2027 to 2029. But we do have, we are structurally balanced for 2025 and 2026, but that does fade in 2027 to 2029.
Though, your projections are accurate there, that we're only 500,000 and just under 700,000, which is fine. We're not drawing from our ending balance, but we all know that, you know, contingencies can come into play, whether it be a natural disaster, whatever it may be, that we're going to have to expend those dollars. But as we go even into the out years, which is what we're trying to get to, the stability in our out years to address our sustainability financially, we're still exceeding our revenues on the city side. And that should, as I stated, that's concerning to some of us. But I think your projections are spot on how you presented it. I appreciate the information. Thank you, Reggie. Mike, appreciate you both. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Stites.
Stites, District 7. So is it the reason that we don't get to vote revenue neutral on the county side and then also revenue neutral on the city side, where they're separate? They're two different ones. Is it because of the unification? Is that why? Because how do other counties, I'm just going to say Johnson County, that has cities within their county, they don't get presented one decision where it's either R&R across the board or two separate R&R discussions?
Yeah, so they are definitely different cities and then they have different counties. So, I mean, they have the ability within their own entities to make a decision. So we don't, with us being unified, you know, there may be the possibility where we could go. I don't know that we can't go like revenue neutral on the county and go revenue neutral in the city. Angela or Debbie, do you all?
I would think, I mean, we submit separate budgets to the state. So I think there is we approve as one budget. But I believe if you wanted to do one revenue neutral, one not, you would simply have to separate the vote.
Well, and I'm not even saying that I want to do that. I'm just saying, it seems like we should have separate discussions. Let's talk about the county budget and then let's talk about the city budget. Instead, it seems like it's kind of just being lumped into, okay, do you want to exceed revenue neutral or not? And we only have one bite at the apple, and that's right now. But we've only really, all the ingredients have been thrown into the pie and not separated out.
So when we do look at it, we are looking at like the city general fund separately and the county general fund.
Okay,
separately.
so what if I today, and I'm just hypothetical, if I was to say, I want to be revenue neutral on the county side, but not the city side, what do we do?
I mean, I think there's something we definitely have to take into consideration. But I think if we do look at like the county general fund and we did go revenue neutral, we aren't meeting like.
And I'm not
Either we're trying
digging
to-
into the numbers right now. I'm just saying, if that's what I wanted to do.
It might be that we've done it together because they both have two different calendars. And then you'd be following two different time frames for the budgets. So it might have been done to keep this together.
Because we do present when we do when we publish the budget statements, we publish a separate statement, a notice for both the city and the county. And then I think the resolution that we approves the budget that you all set. You agree to set the city mill levy at a certain level and the county mill levy. And then the resolution, I think, covers that. But if you wanted to do them separately, I don't think that's an issue.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments, committee? Seeing none. Thank you.
But we would like to get a consensus from you all on which calendar we should follow. Should we follow the revenue neutral calendar or should we follow the non-revenue neutral calendar?
Commissioner Stites.
When do we have to have that? We have three commissioners that aren't in the room tonight. So when is our next workshop, and is that workshop sufficient to give that answer?
So we do have another budget workshop on April the 18th.
Okay. I say that we wait till that one and have potentially have all the commissioners that are missing in the room.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. I am interested in looking at specifically the potential of county revenue neutral, which I know would put us on two different calendars. I'm just saying I'd like to look at that.
Can we bring the
My personal thought right now is city follow the non-revenue neutral calendar. But I would like to look at I mean, you've shown us quite a bit of what the impact is of revenue neutral. And then I think it kind of comes down to what Commissioner Burrows was referencing, which is what would we not do? Where would we have efficiency or cuts? But I'm interested in looking at it on the county side.
Any other comments, questions?
So I know we need to get out of here, but one thing I will just advise on ongoing revenue neutral in the county. So that is the chart that's at the top. So one of our goals is fiscal sustainability. And so looking at like a 2025 budget, we're definitely going into where we don't have a sustainable budget there, just as far as it's structurally imbalanced at $3.28 million. And then also our reserves as an expenditure, we'd like to be at 17%. That's where our own fund balance says, and it's at like 6%. So going revenue neutral, if we were to go revenue neutral to get structurally balanced, we would be looking at cutting like $3.2 million from the budget.
And it's Commissioner Bynum, to your point, and to Commissioner Burrow's point, for 2025, if we looked at revenue neutral, we would need to be looking at what would we do on the expenditure side to not have that $3.28 million ending deficit. What would we not spend? And that's what I would like us all to be looking at together.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am. Welcome to the committee.
Thank-
Doctor, please.
Yes, Shelley Kneven, I'm your new CFO. Glad to be here. One of the things that I would offer is that, and it was helpful to me when I joined the college to better understand this revenue neutral process. But even if you move forward with the calendar that is not for revenue neutral, that does not mean that you've made that decision to not be revenue neutral.
Exactly.
So I think it just gives you more time to have the policy discussions, and then you could adopt one at revenue neutral. You could reduce one, you could keep one the same, but it gives you just the time. It just says to the public that we are looking at those tax levies and evaluating options. So if that's helpful to you, you'd still have the policy decision to make.
It is, Doctor. Thank you very, very much for that clarification. Commissioner Kane?
I like that. Oops, sorry. I like that idea. And I think that's the direction we can go because we still have the opportunity to go revenue neutral and we don't handcuff these guys in a short time frame. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Mr. Johnston had any closing comments he'd like to make. Staff, any other closing comments? Legal? Administrator's office? Okay, seeing none, that is, there's no further business to come before this governing body. I would ask for a motion to adjourn, but I do want you to know that we're going to continue on into the police graduation at 6 p.m. So please be there. Do I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
So move. Second.
I think you do.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call roll.
Roll call, Hill, Kane, Lopez,
Aye.
Stites, Bynum,
Aye.
Burns.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We will reconvene at 7 o'clock for the full commission meeting in chambers. Not in fifth floor downstairs. I'm sorry,
It's
in
not
chambers.
across the
No,
street.
it's in our
Okay.
chambers. Yeah, the point of clear. It's downstairs in the chambers. Oh. Even full valuation, we're still falling short. That's what I said. You know, this is